my two events that I attended, as well as in detail my interviews. I will follow that up with my experiences that I've learned throughout this process, and then also discuss some applications to counseling. First two key elements that I'm going to discuss is common attitudes, beliefs, and values relative to recent immigrants, as well as prominent customs, practices, and behaviors. Something to point out about recent immigrants is that this group can include a variety of cultures, and across cultures, each key element can be extremely different. When I was doing my research, my primary goal was to look at multiple cultures of immigrants and compare and contrast as it pertains to the key elements that I'm going to discuss. And so, when looking at common attitudes, beliefs, and values relative to recent immigrants, although the core values will still exist within the various cultural groups of immigrants, studies have shown that pre-immigration beliefs can contribute to acculturative stress. In general, it can be fair to conclude that immigrants place in high value on their beliefs and attitudes towards their culture. However, the acculturation process can cause unforeseen stressors that can have mental, emotional, and physical impact on the immigrants. So, although I do believe that there is a high um, morale when it comes to the attitudes about their beliefs and values, when they do migrate to other cultures, other countries, there can be stressors, overall stressors, that can impact them. As it relates to the prominent customs, practices, and behaviors, there is a sense of immigrants wanting to keep their current customs and practices, yet there's also a desire for them to acclimate to the traditions of their new society. I don't feel that their want for acclimation outweighs them wanting to maintain their own custom and practices, especially if they have children, because they want to make sure that they maintain a sense of value for their customs and practices, so that way they can share that with their children. First, two other key elements that came up in my research was spirituality and religion as it pertains to recent immigrants, as well as key historical events and figures impacting cultural and societal perception of recent immigrants. When we look at spirituality and religion, although various cultures have different spiritual beliefs and practices, there is no evidence to conclude that a particular group will dismiss their practices and customs because they move to another country. Let's look at Muslim immigrants, for example. When they come over to America, they still keep all of their customs around prayer and just their beliefs as it pertains to their religion. There are several mosques all over the United States where Muslims can go to pray. One of America's pillars and constitutional rights is the freedom of religion. So one can conclude that immigrants would keep any religious belief and practices even though they migrate to other countries. When we look at key historical events and figures impacting the cultural and societal perception of recent immigrants, this was something that was really big in my research and also in my personal experiences. There are so many different historical events that impact immigrants. One huge one is 9/11. Middle Eastern immigrants in this country at a time had so much oppression and prejudices inflicted upon them because of this massacre that occurred on U.S. soil. There were bans on who could come in and leave the country. For many immigrants, This meant not knowing when they could be reunited with their families, nor knowing the potential threats they could experience on a daily basis. When we look at Hispanic immigrants, they have had to face so many trials, especially due to the orders of our previous administration. The conditions that they were placed in when detained in camps and separated from their families just shows the injustices that they have endured. There are so many negative mindsets when it comes to Hispanic immigrants and the racial injustices inflicted upon them just because of what could be portrayed in the media, for example, and then also what has occurred throughout this former administration are simply inhumane. Another group that has recently been in the spotlight, so to speak, um, for from a societal perspective as it pertains to a key historical event would be Asian immigrants with coronavirus. A lot of news media outlets have shared some type of injustice inflicted on this group because of the misconception that this particular group was a central cause for the pandemic. Society has placed so many stereotypical misnomers on these and so many other immigrants to the point where people in this group can get a guilty by association mindset, which is not fair to anyone experiencing injustices. Both from an historical and current perspective, the oppression of immigrants has similarly existed throughout the course of time. Immigrants in this country have been historically oppressed and treated with prejudices. When we look at the climate today and how Hispanic immigrants are separated from their families and kept in cages, it tells us that oppression still exists. So many times, immigrants are met with racial injustices despite them wanting to come to America, for example, to have a better life or to have a piece of the American dream. The saddening thing is, America is such a melting pot and known for its diverse cultures and religions, but Americans are not accepting of immigrants. Throughout my lifetime, I have come to see that the political climate plays a key role in the acceptance or oppression of immigrants. Oppression and discrimination, while it's universally known, sometimes it can be hard to prove if it's not direct. On the other hand, systematic oppression can be blatantly seen because it's an entire system delivering the oppression on a group or groups of people. I'm a part of a nonprofit that does a lot of work in the community. One of our major events is to go to a local mission and serve breakfast to the residents living there. Although our primary duties include preparing and serving the breakfast, because of this project, I was able to connect more with the individuals and families that live there. And I actually had a conversation with a family from Congo. Although they were reserved, they were willing to share their story and how they came to live in the community. The one thing that they did feel that they appreciated was the resources and assistance that they were receiving. It felt really good to not only connect with the family, but also just hear about why they wanted to come over to the United States. Although it was primarily for a job opportunity, they also wanted to make sure that they gave their children a better future. I felt extremely blessed to have an opportunity to be a servant leader to help those less fortunate and also to be able to connect to the different cultures that resided at the mission. I have a peer who is an educator at a local Head Start, and I was given permission to sit in on a new parent orientation. There were some families from Congo who had younger children that would be attending the school. One of the family had only one son, and the other had two daughters and a son. I point out the gender of the students because one thing I immediately recognized was how the families referenced and treated their children. In each family, the sons were held in such high regard. Everything was done for them. They weren't as self-sufficient as the daughters. At first, I thought this could be because of the age difference, but then I learned that they were all relatively close in age. Now, although I was only there to observe, it was good to hear the questions asked when it came to the educational structure, even though this was at the preschool level. I learned that there's a lot of value placed on education and the family dynamics when it comes to immigrants, especially those from Congo. Now, this does align with research done on the topic regarding South Asian immigrants, and studies show that the pre-immigration beliefs influence cultural adaptation during the acculturation process. So essentially, if there was a high regard placed on education prior to them migrating over to another country, that high regard of education will continue after they come over to another country. I had an opportunity to interview a couple from Congo. They were from Brazzaville. They shared how they loved their country but wanted to come over to the United States for a better life. They lived in Chicago for a few years, then came to my city for work opportunities. They shared that the process was not easy, but the life that they get to give to their now young children is great. They express that they are really big on traditional education and they want to make sure that their children don't lose any of their heritage. When asked what it was like being in a different country, they shared that they had to get used to a lot of American traditions and customs, but they knew their aspirations and they wanted to make sure that they made it work no matter what. They also shared that they get help from other families within the community. There's a large presence when it comes to Congo families in the community, so they're able to connect with them and they really appreciate that. We discussed some cultural events that may be different from the ones here in the United States. So they do have an Independence Day. Now, the Independence Day is not on July 4th, it's actually celebrated on June 30th. They have what's called a Parents' Day, where parents are celebrated. They have a Youth Day, where the youth is celebrated, and they have Christmas. Now, when it comes to Christmas, Christmas is not about gifts and the mainstream things that we see here in the U.S. However, it's a festival, and it starts on Christmas Eve with a lot of music and celebration, and then it goes into Christmas Day, and that's more celebration and feast, and it really focuses largely on religion and not about getting presents. So the true meaning of Christmas. My reactions, I really appreciated just learning about the culture and what the differences, but also the similarities. And one thing that made me smile particularly was Christmas because although in my family we do give gifts for Christmas, I make sure that my children know about the true meaning of Christmas and we make sure that we celebrate the spiritual side of Christmas before we open up any gifts. So I really appreciated that there are some similarities. I would definitely love to visit Congo one day just so I can take in the rich culture and just to be connected to Africa in another way. That's really important to me. Overall, I really love to learn about the family and everything that they are currently doing in the community, all their aspirations that they want to give their young children, and even the goals that they have for themselves and continuing their education. And that was really good to hear as well. This was a really good interview, and I just look forward to continue to learn and grow and just to have an overall understanding of not only the families from Congo, but other immigrants as well. In my profession, I work really closely with nonprofits and other businesses across the United States. One of my business partners is an organization called Raza Development Fund. I had an opportunity to interview a contact from the organization. Raza's mission is to invest capital and create financial solutions to increase opportunities for Latino and poor families across the country. I learned that Raza is really involved with various Latino communities and they work really closely with Latino immigrants. Their work continues to show how important it is to stay connected to this group. Some of the services offered by Raza is community development in Latino communities, financial education, the collecting of PPP items for Latino and poor communities, and providing loans to small Latino businesses. One recent need that Raza has tackled or is in the process of tackling pertains to the COVID-19 vaccine and the access of that vaccine for Latino and poor communities. Raza has a program called the Latino Community Vaccination Assistance Program, and the initiative assists bilingual and bicultural community-based nonprofits who provide accurate information, outreach, appointment management, transportation, and vaccine delivery. The goal is to better serve low-income families through the access of resources, expertise, and targeted funding to achieve improvements and responses, especially in this era of COVID-19. Some of the challenges that Raza expressed as it pertains to the population is just an overall willingness to get assistance. A lot of times services are provided in Hispanic neighborhoods, but some don't seek them. Another issue it relates to resources and the reach that it has in smaller communities. So both challenges for Raza weigh heavily on the relationship with various nonprofits. The nonprofits in the community take a large responsibility, and they are the ones that have their boots on the ground when it comes to connecting to those people that actually live in those communities. When we look at social injustice is really important to Raza. One issue those in the Latino community face is the ability to get loans. To support community development, Raza provides various loans to small businesses. They continue to partner with nonprofits to help support the awareness of social injustices inflicted on the Hispanic community. With today's climate, it's really important to understand the importance of awareness and making sure that policymakers are out there to protect the Latino community. The organization has a desire to continue to grow in this space, and they look forward to what more can be done in the future. Overall, it was really good to just learn more about Raza and the things that they do for the Hispanic community. I really enjoy being able to provide their organizations with nonprofit funding so that they can continue to go out and assist those in need. When I selected recent immigrants for my cultural immersion experience project, I underestimated the amount of knowledge that I would gain throughout this entire process. It was really good to not only be able to learn things from my research, but also to connect with not only people of other cultures, but also organizations that work with various cultures. I am really appreciative for the cultural differences and experiences that I have learned because there is so much rich culture in my community. It's also good to see that in other communities, when it comes to immigrants, that they also have a sense of rich culture. I also became really understanding and appreciative of the perspective of immigrants. They are human just like all of us, and although they choose to come over to another country, it doesn't mean that they should be afflicted with prejudices or injustices. What we should do is learn as much as we can from them and embrace their cultural differences because we just may learn something from them just like they can learn things from us. theories that have been empirically validated as effective for recent immigrants are the client-centered theory and the Adlerian theory. When we look at the client-centered theory, what has been mainly effective for recent immigrants is the relation-building aspect of the theory. It can move a client from a place of rigidness to being more open and fluent and accepting of feelings and experiences. And that is really important when we look at cultural differences for recent immigrants. With the Adlerian theory, the approach explores on individual social nature during interactions and influences of the social environment, and that does play a role in a person's development. So this theory was evident in being effective based on what I observed, particularly in my new patient orientation event. Overall, these two theories can be effective with recent immigrants because of their underlying concept. One theory focuses on the importance of relationships, while the other focuses on social interaction. Ultimately, when counseling these groups, there also should be an overall increase of cultural awareness. You want to make sure as a counselor that you are aware of cultural differences and even those aspects that are important to this culture so that way you can better assist them in their counseling process. I would like to thank you for taking the time out to listen to this presentation on my cultural immersion experience for recent immigrants. I hope that you were able to learn and benefit from this presentation as much as I did. Thank you.